Manifestation and management of coronavirus. First of all, I would like to discuss the case definition of novel coronavirus. As per the WHO guidelines, case definition, control definition has been issued. And when do we suspect a case of coronavirus infection? When there is a patient with severe acute respiratory infection, presenting with cough, fever, dyspnea, requiring admission with unexplained etiology. There is no obvious etiology, and the history of travel or residence in China for the prior 14 days. The second definition of suspect case is any patient with acute respiratory illness with at least one of the following during the prior 14 days time. Either A, contact with confirmed or probable case of 2019 novel coronavirus infection, or worked in or attended the healthcare facility where such patients are being treated. So this is a definition of suspect case. Now what is probable case? Any suspect case for whom the testing for coronavirus is inconclusive or is tested positive for pan-coronavirus assays without lab evidence of other respiratory pathogen. And the confirmed case is any person with laboratory confirmation of 2019 novel coronavirus infection, irrespective of signs and symptoms. Now, WHO recommendation for follow-up of contacts. The definition of contact is any person with who is involved in these four criteria. Any person providing direct care for 2019 novel coronavirus patients, working with healthcare worker infected with novel coronavirus, or visiting patients or staying in the same close environment as novel coronavirus patients. Any person working together in close proximity or sharing the same close environment with the patient. Any person traveling together with the patient in any kind of conveyance. Living in the same household as coronavirus patient within 14 days prior to the onset of symptoms. Now, WHO recommendations for monitoring of contacts of probable and confirmed cases. The contact has to be monitored for 14 days from the last unprotected contact. This 14 days is because the incubation period, considering the incubation period of the virus, and this is the maximum time in which the patient harboring the infection can manifest the symptoms. The contact should self-limit the travel and movements so as to avoid the infection of other persons. Any contact who become ill or manifest the signs and symptoms of the infection becomes a suspect case, and that should be tested. And contact whose any identifiable, like any newly identified probable or confirmed case should have their own contacts traced and monitored. So these are the WHO guidelines for the management of N coronavirus associated severe acute respiratory infection. I'll discuss this topic in the following heads. Price, implementation, immediate implementation of appropriate infection protection, infection prevention and control measures. This topic is very important. And early supportive therapy, collection of specimen, as has been discussed in the previous session. Management of the ARDS, management of septic shock, prevention of complication, and specific anti-novel coronavirus treatment. Price. So whenever any patient coming to the healthcare facility, at the first point of contact, maybe it is emergency or OPD, it should be triaged into mild, moderate, and severe acute respiratory infection. And this is for the timely initiation of the infection prevention and control measures if novel coronavirus infection is suspected. Those with severe acute respiratory tract infection should be given optimized supportive care, safe and rapid admission to the ICU. And those with a mild illness can be managed at home with advice of limited travel, limited movements, and worsening of the symptoms. In case there is a worsening of the symptoms, they should report to the hospital. Now, these are the different clinical syndromes which are associated with novel coronavirus infection. Patient can manifest with simple upper respiratory tract infection, like simple flu-like symptoms like fever, cough, sore throat, malaise, nasal congestion. They don't have any signs of sepsis and shortness of breath. Mild pneumonia. Patient may have mild pneumonia but no signs of severe pneumonia. What is severe pneumonia? Severe pneumonia is a pneumonia with at least one of the following features: respiratory rate more than 30 per minute, severe respiratory distress, saturation of oxygen saturation less than 90% at room air. So if the patient satisfies these one of these criteria, he falls into severe pneumonia. ARDS, any virus, unlike influenza virus, this virus can also manifest in the form of ARDS. So as per the Wallin definition for ARDS, there are 4 criteria. It should be acute in onset, that is within 7 days of insult. On chest radiography, there should be bilateral infiltrate which cannot be explained by collapse. Third is left heart failure. The signs of left heart failure should be ruled out. And fourth is PF ratio. PF ratio is the PO2 by FiO2 ratio. It is a measure of oxygenation. It should be less than 300. So based on this PF ratio, the patient can be classified into mild, moderate and severe ARDS. If the PF ratio is less than 300, more than 200, it is mild ARDS. If it is between 100 and 200, it is moderate ARDS. If it is less than 100, it is severe ARDS. This novel coronavirus can also manifest in the form of sepsis. So there's a life-threatening organ dysfunctions in the form of patient can have altered mental status, oliguria, hypotension. So these signs are present and the patient lands up in sepsis. And septic shock, if there is a persistent hypotension despite fluid resuscitation, and vasopressors are needed to maintain the mean arterial pressure more than 65, and if the blood lactate is more than 2 millimole per liter. So whenever you come across any patient with suspected novel coronavirus infection, immediate implementation of the infection prevention and control measures should be applied. So they can be applied at various levels. So at triage, that is at the first point of contact with the healthcare facility, this topic is very important. See, there is no, in the previous epidemics of coronavirus, let us SARS and MERS, these are the measures which helped in the control of epidemic. So these measures are very important. At the triage level, the suspect should be given a medical mask, not necessarily an N95, and patient should be directed to a separate area, preferably an isolation room if available. If isolation room is not available, then keep at least 1 meter distance between the suspect case and other patients. Instruct all other patients to cover their nose and mouth when the suspect is sneezing, coughing, either with a tissue or flex elbow. Perform hand hygiene after contact with the secretion of the respiratory secretion of the suspect patient. Second is apply droplet precautions. As has been discussed in the previous session, this virus spreads through droplet transmission. So the prevention of the droplet transmission of the respiratory virus is very important. Use medical mask and eye protections measures if you are working in within 1 or 2 meters of the suspect patient. Place patient in a single isolation room if possible, or group together with the same etiological diagnosis. If the etiological diagnosis cannot be made, then you can cluster the patient as per their similar clinical diagnosis and based on the epidemiological risk factor with spatial separation, that is 1 meter distance. Limit patient's movement and ensure that patient is wearing the mask as soon as he leaves his room. This virus can also spread through contact transmissions by fomites. So we have to prevent the indirect transmission from contact with the contaminated surface and equipments. Use personal protective equipments like medical masks, eye protections, and gloves, preferably long sleeve gloves and gowns. While entering, and remove those PPE while leaving the patient's room. Use disposable or dedicated equipment like stethoscope while examining these patients. And if equipment needs to be shared, it should be cleaned and disinfected. Avoid contaminating the environmental surfaces that are not directly related to the patient care, like doors, switches, and there should be adequate room ventilation. Hand hygiene should be maintained, and the movement of the patient should be restricted. So this topic is very important for healthcare workers who are involved in nursing the suspect patient. So apply airborne precautions when you are performing aerosol generating procedures, so like intubation. So ensure the healthcare worker use personal protective equipments like gloves, eye protective measures, and long sleeve gowns, N95 mask while performing these procedures. Use adequately ventilated rooms, preferably negative pressure rooms with minimal tall air exchanges per hour while performing these procedures, and avoid the presence of unnecessary individuals. So early supportive therapy and monitoring. So whenever a patient of severe acute respiratory illness comes to you, you have to give the supplemental oxygen to these patients to relieve the respiratory distress and hypoxemia. Use conservative fluid management if the patient is not in shock. Empirical antimicrobials like oseltamivir, because influenza can also manifest in similar ways. Oseltamivir and other antibiotics if they are suspected, to cover all the possible causes of such severe acute respiratory illness. It should be given within like 4 hours if sepsis is present. Steroids are not routinely given because in various trials it has been confirmed that the steroids, they do not have any survival benefits, and moreover they leads to increase the risk of secondary infections. They should not be given. Patients should be closely monitored for deteriorations, and comorbid, as you know, these infections, they have a high case fatality rate in patients with comorbid conditions like diabetes, pregnancy. So these comorbid conditions should be managed properly. This topic has been covered in the previous session. So management of the hypoxic respiratory failure and ARDS. The patient should be recognized. If you are seeing any patient who is in respiratory distress, you have to see whether he is in ARDS or not. So high flow nasal oxygen and or non-invasive ventilation can be given, but it should be used very cautiously, because there's a high risk of NIV failure. A patient can deteriorate very rapidly. So they should be watched very closely. And if there is a sign of deterioration, if the patient's sensorium is altered, he is not maintaining the oxygenation in spite of high flow nasal oxygen and NIV support. So endotracheal intubation should be done by a trained and experienced provider using airborne precautions. Pre-oxygenate the patient with 100% oxygen for at least 5 minutes, especially in obese, pregnant ladies and children, because they are more likely to desaturate while intubating. As soon as the patient is put on ventilative support, invasive ventilative support, lung protective ventilation should be given. Like in other cases of, in other causes of ARDS, this lung protective ventilation is very important. It has shown to have improved survival And what is lung protective ventilation? It is basically a low tidal volume, high PEEP ventilation. High PEEP means a positive end expiratory pressure. This is actually different parameters in invasive ventilation. So this the pathophysiology of ARDS in all these viral infection is that there is a vacuum mismatch, there is a shunt, there is a alveolar filling of the lungs. So due to this alveolar filling, there is no oxygenation of the blood which is reaching to these alveoli. So this this blood is shunted from the oxygenation process. So this shunt, due to this shunt pathology, we need to give a high PEEP. So due to this high PEEP, this there's a recruitment of new alveoli, and this shunt fraction is decreased. So patient should be given high PEEP and low tidal volume ventilation. And in severe ARDS, prone ventilation, that is patient in prone position, should be given for more than 12 hours. Conservative fluid management studies should be given for ARDS patient without tissue hypoperfusion. Deep sedation is recommended in all patients to control the respiratory drive and to achieve the set volume targets. Neuromuscular blockade by continuous infusion is not recommended, routinely recommended. It should be given in patients who are having ventilator dyssynchrony in spite of these, deep sedation, or there is a refractory hypoxemia in spite of giving lung protective ventilation. If the patient is not able to maintain the oxygenation in spite of lung protective ventilation, the patient should be referred to a facility where extracorporeal life support is present, and where the infection prevention and control measures can be applied. Avoid disconnecting the patient from ventilator because it can result in loss of PEEP, that is positive end expiratory pressure, and as a result of that, there is a atelectasis of the lung. So it can worsen the oxygenation of the patient. So inline catheter for suction should be used, and if at all there is a need for the disconnection of the ventilator, then endotracheal tube should be clamped so that the PEEP is not lost. Management of septic shock. The basic principles of management of septic shock are similar to other causes. We have to recognize whether septic shock is present or not. So it is defined as persistent hypotension despite fluid resuscitation, and vasopressors are needed to maintain the mean alveolar pressure more than 65 mm of Hg, and lactates are more than 2 millimole per liter. So whenever a patient with severe acute respiratory tract infection comes with like septic shock, so initially fluid resuscitation should be given, and give at least 30 ml per kg of isotonic crystalloids like normal saline for in the first 3 hours. This fluid resuscitation is a double-edged sword. It can lead to volume overload and respiratory failure. So you have to decrease or you have to stop the volume resuscitation if there is a signs of volume overload or if there is no response to the volume resuscitation. Now, if the patient does not have the hypertension does not improve to volume resuscitation, then vasopressor like noradrenaline, vasopressin, dopamine, and adrenaline should be given when shock is persisting. If the signs of poor perfusion and cardiac dysfunction are present, despite achieving the mean arterial pressure targets, then patient should be started on inotropes like dobutamine. Now, as the patient of severe acute respiratory attack is admitted in intensive care, then we have to prevent the complications to decrease the number of hospital days. We have to decrease the days of invasive ventilation. You have to use weaning protocols and see whether there is a spontaneous breathing. We have to reduce the or minimize the continuous or intermittent sedation. We have to decrease the rate of incidence of VAP, ventilator-associated pneumonia. For that, oral intubation is preferred. Patient should be in a semi-recumbent position, and closed suction system should be used. There should be a new ventilator circuit for each and every patient. decrease the incidence of venous thromboembolism. The basic principles are same. Either you can use pharmacological prophylaxis like heparin. If it is contraindicated, then you can use mechanical prophylaxis like pneumatic compression devices. Reduce the incidence of pressure ulcers. You have to change the position of the patient every 2 hours. Decrease the incidence of stress ulcer and GI bleed. For that, early and enteral nutrition should be given, and administer proton pump inhibitor if there's a risk factor for GI bleeding, like mechanical ventilation for more than 48 hours. If there's a liver disease, if there's a renal replacement therapy, if the patient has coagulopathy. You have to reduce the incidence of ICU-related weakness like neuropathy, myopathy. So for that, early and active mobilization of the patient should be done. Because these patients can succumb to critical illness, neuropathy and myopathy. So as per the, there is no current evidence from this conducted randomized control trial. There is no actually there is no medication to treat the novel coronavirus. So this is very unfortunate. So what should be the discharge policy of novel coronavirus case? If you are planning to discharge such patients, though repeated and periodic testing for the novel coronavirus should be done. Recommended is at least it should be done every 2 to 4 days. If the sample results are negative, then patient can be discharged. If there's a radiological clearing and at least 2 samples are negative, 2 consecutive samples are negative, 24 hours apart. If the tests are positive, then patient should be managed. If the patient is being discharged, then you have to give the advice that you have to come back if there's a reappearance of the symptoms. So this advice is very important. So what is the take-home message? See, whatever epidemics we have seen, like previous SARS, MERS, so basically these viruses, they are transmitted from animal to human. And thereafter this epidemic, it grows very disproportionately. And the reason is that there's a very high risk of transmission from human to human. So we have to break this chain of human to human transmission. So this infection prevention and control measures are very important. Earlier also we have controlled such epidemics by these measures only. And this is a very tough time, and we don't need to panic. Just we have to wash these Wuhan, this pneumonic, we have to remember. You have to wash hands properly. You have to use mask properly, and you have to check your temperature regularly. Avoid large crowds, and never touch your face with unclean hands. Thank you so much.